Corporation's Standing Committee on Health. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. I believe all of our witnesses are here in person. Just a couple of MPs hybrid. So I can dispense with all of the notes with respect to hybrid participation. I can advise, in accordance with our routine motion, that I am informing the committee that all remote participants have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 108, Sub 2, and the motion adopted September 18th, 2023, the committee is holding a briefing session on natural health product regulations. I am pleased to welcome our witnesses from the Department of Health, Lindsay Hollett, Assistant Deputy Minister, Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch, Dr. Celia Lorenko, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Health Products and Food Branch, and Dr. Supriya Sharma, Chief Medical Advisor and Senior Medical Advisor, Health Products and Food Branch. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. Some of you have made some significant personal and professional sacrifices to be here, I know. You have up to 5 minutes to provide your opening statement, and I understand Dr. Lorenko is going to do that. Yeah. Welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you. Bonsoir à tous. I would like to thank the committee.
Good evening.
Opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Celia Lorenko, and I am the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of the Health Products and Food Branch at Health Canada. I'm joined by Dr. Supriya Sharma, Chief Medical Advisor at Health Canada, and Lindsay Hollett, Assistant Deputy Minister of the Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch. Natural health products, or NHPs, such as vitamins, minerals, and herbal remedies, are used daily by Canadians to maintain and improve their health. These products are regulated under the Natural Health Products Regulations, which were established nearly 2 decades ago in response to a study undertaken by this very committee. The regulations take into account the lower risk profile of these products and their ability to make health benefit claims. Since that time, Health Canada estimates there to be over 200,000 products available to Canadians on the market. Our highest priority is to ensure that Canadians have access to safe, high-quality products to help care for themselves and their families. Bien que des progrès aient été réalisés.
While progress has been made over the past 20 years, the 2021 audit by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development found significant gaps in oversight, underscoring the need for more action. This includes the need for increased oversight of the quality of NHPs, improved product labeling, greater monitoring of labels and advertising, and introducing a proactive, risk-based inspection. Following the audit, Health Canada made firm commitments to strengthen its oversight of NHPs, as we discussed last year with many of your colleagues at the Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
Chair, while NHPs are often perceived as lower risk, they are not without risk, especially if products contain contaminants or are used improperly. When Canadians reach for a product, it is essential they have confidence in its safety. They also need to be able to trust that what's on the label accurately represents what's inside the bottle and that the health claims the product makes are truthful. Health Canada recently conducted a pilot to proactively search the web and identify potential instances of non-compliant advertising. The equivalent of 3,800 advertising incidents were identified, and our assessment confirmed that 2,070 made cancer claims not permitted by Health Canada. Furthermore, when looking at the NHP marketplace between 2021 and 2023, there were 100 voluntary recalls of licensed NHPs for safety issues. De plus, Santé Canada a lancé un programme pilote d'inspection entre mars 2021.
Moreover, Health Canada launched a pilot inspection program between March 2021 and March 2022, during which 36 sites of manufacturers and importers were inspected for good manufacturing practices. The pilot revealed issues ranging in severity at all sites, reinforcing the need for a permanent inspection program.
These gaps are why we are making changes to improve the safety of NHPs. Last year, Health Canada introduced new labeling regulations to help ensure consumers have the information they need when choosing products. This year, new legislation was passed allowing Health Canada to act on serious safety issues, like ordering recalls or requiring warnings on labels if a company doesn't take action voluntarily. Plus récemment, Santé Canada a mené des...
More recently, Health Canada completed open and transparent consultations, garnering close to 5,000 responses on a proposal that would see industry pay fees so that the department can, among other things, inspect manufacturing sites to improve product quality and safety.
Activities currently conducted by Health Canada in overseeing NHPs is currently paid fully by taxpayers. In comparison, regulatory services for all other health products are funded through a mix of service fees and public funding. If Health Canada does not charge fees for its services, the department is enabled to strengthen its oversight of NHPs. While NHPs undoubtedly offer public health benefits, they also benefit private enterprises that make up the multi-billion-dollar industry for these products. Ensuring sustainable funding of the oversight of NHPs while preserving accessibility and quality requires balancing taxpayers and industry contributions more equitably. We understand that many small businesses worry about the additional costs new fees would bring and their ability to continue marketing their products to Canadians. This is why we are proposing significant mitigation measures, such as meaningful fee reductions and waivers for small businesses. As we complete the review of the thousands of comments received on our recently concluded consultation, we are considering how best to adjust our proposed approach to address the many concerns raised prior to further engagement with stakeholders. Pour conclure, Monsieur le Président, nous sommes...
In conclusion, Mr. Chair, we have a commitment to Canadians to ensure that the natural health products they rely on every day to maintain and improve their health are safe. And we have a plan to do just that. We are now pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lorenko. We will now begin with rounds of questions, starting with the Conservatives. Dr. Ellis for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'll ask Dr. Sharma first off. And Dr. Sharma, we've known each other for some time. I thank you for being here. Appreciate that. You'd made some comments in the media about misinformation and disinformation related to what was going on here. And, you know, it pains me a bit. I think that there's a bit of a truism here. If you tax the farmer that grows the food and you tax the trucker that ships the food, then the person who buys the food is going to have to pay more for it. If you could briefly tell me the difference here in this scheme where you're taxing people who make these products and people who distribute these products, then how is the consumer not going to have to pay more?
Thank you. Chair, just to first kind of clarify the comment that I made in the interview. When we were talking about misinformation and disinformation, it was specifically in the context of some of the initiatives that were there that were insinuating that Health Canada was specifically anti-NHP, or that we were going, we've heard at times that we're going to ban parsley or go into people's gardens and pull out cilantro. And so it really was in the context of some of the rhetoric that was out there, that the context of the misinformation and disinformation comment was there. And it was really to illustrate that we're happy to have the conversation about any regulation that we put forward, and including the cost recovery regulations. But we would, it's constructive if it's based in facts. And the facts are that we have a program where the costs of the entire regulatory framework are currently borne by the taxpayer. So 100% of those taxes, those costs are borne by the taxpayer. And there are gaps in the system now. So we know that through pilot programs that we have on inspections, on good manufacturing practices, on surveys that we've done, on claims, on advertising, that we do have a compliance gap there. And there are necessary improvements that need to be made in order to regulate these products effectively, to ensure that they're safe and effective and of high quality, and that Canadians can go into a safe marketplace. So that's the principle. And then the proposal
Thanks very much, Dr. Sharma. I guess I would point you back to the question, if I may, related to the cost recovery program. We also know very clearly that 20% of manufacturers and distributors in this industry have clearly said that they're likely to go out of business, which will reduce consumer choice. So once again, if we're going to put costs on the back of small and medium-sized businesses in Canada, is it not true that consumers are going to have to pay more as well?
So we're very concerned about small and medium-sized businesses. We know that they're the backbone of the economy and that they want to have products for Canadians that are safe and effective. And that's why we have fee mitigation for those small businesses. So decreases of 25 to 50% in terms of the costs for small companies. If it's their first submission, a complete fee waiver. And again, the proposals that are out there are really for consultation. So we've gotten, as Dr. Lorenko has said, thousands of comments, and we're in the process of looking at that and making modifications, and we'll put forward a new proposal. But it comes down to the fact that there are improvements that need to be made. Those improvements do require some resources, and the question is where do those resources come from? And really, this is the only product line, the only health product line where 100% of those costs of that regulatory framework are from appropriations or from taxpayer dollars.
Well, thanks, Dr. Sharma. Did I hear you correctly for everyone who's in attendance here that through the consultation process, there's an expectation that small and medium-sized businesses can now have that the fees are going to be less?
Part of the proposal. So for small, and there's a definition for qualifying small businesses, so they can qualify for between a 25 and a 50% reduction in fees. And again, for their first submission, the fees are waived completely.
I saw that originally, but what I heard you say was that through the consultative process, that is going to change again. Those fees will actually be less?
What I was saying that's part of the proposal, the current proposal. And again, there's no fees that have been put in place at this point in time. It's just a proposal that's been out for consultation. That's closed. So the proposed fee mitigation was 25 to 50%. But if we get comments that are different, then potentially that could change. So we're open to comments. And
through you, Chair, if I may, and I apologize for my not use of the chair. I do apologize for that, sir. But that being said, when can manufacturers and distributors expect to hear back on this consultation process and the reduced fee?
So in terms of the comments, we received 4,700 comments, and the consultation period just closed. I will say, though, that in those comments, there are a lot of comments that simply say we do not want to pay fees at all. If you really look at the comments where we got constructive suggestions on how to change the framework or the cost recovery fee structure, those were only about 1 to 3% of those comments. But we're in the process of going through that now, and in the coming weeks we can come back with a summary of the changes that we may be putting forth in response to those comments.
And if I may, Chair, what we heard originally from the Minister in the House of Commons was 700 people injured and hospitalized due to natural health products. Where's the reference for that? Very simply, I know I don't have any time left, but what reference is used there?
The reference was for reported adverse events to Health Canada in the last 2 years. So there were over 1,000 reports that we received of adverse reactions that were potentially linked to.
I guess where was it though? Because I've searched, I can't find it anywhere.
So that's available if you look at the Health Canada the database. We actually put those out publicly, but you would have to do a search for adverse events and natural health products, and so we've done that and compiled those.
Would you table that with the committee, please, Dr. Sharma?
We can see what the reference specifically. We can provide the reference, and then again, this is publicly available information, but we can provide that.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma and Dr. Ellis. Next, over to Dr. Pawlowski, please, for 6 minutes.
So thank you, and thank you all for being here. Certainly, I don't know the rest of the MPs, but certainly my email box was inundated with complaints about this law. I received all kinds of postcards, and I have to say I'm a little perplexed as to why. I do understand to a certain extent why, but certainly parts of it, it's hard to see why you wouldn't be advocating for it, and one of them being my understanding is that previously Vanessa's law, which requires hospitals and producers to report on adverse effects of drugs, didn't apply to natural health products. But this is changing that. And so I wanted to ask you a bit about the adverse effects of some medications. And I looked it up. Some of them, for example, there's interactions. So, for example, St. John's wort with SSRIs, which are treatments for depression, can cause serotonin syndrome, which can be deadly. Hepatotoxicity, there's a whole bunch of drugs implicated in that, particularly drugs in the class of pyrrolizidine alkaloids, and there are ayurvedic medications that have that in there. Comfrey, echinacea, ginkgo biloba has antiplatelet and antithrombotic properties, so interacts with Coumadin, NSAIDs, aspirin. And then I got another one here I wrote down. Canadian Medical Association Journal this summer, August 2023, had a case report of somebody presenting with lead toxicity. And when they eventually found out that the lead was coming from Ayurvedic medicine the person was taking in order to try to get pregnant, they stopped it. She got better. But in Ontario, Public Health looked into Ayurvedic medications and found one that had 13% of the content was lead. So now, have you been, do you agree with some of these? Because my saying it isn't going to get it enter into the record, I don't believe. And secondly, have people been complaining, and have producers of naturopathic medications been actually complaining about having to report serious adverse effects, and doctors having to report serious adverse? I find it hard to believe that people would actually complain about having to report such things. Or am I wrong? Are they not complaining?
So the short answer is they're not complaining because it's not in effect yet, that specific provision under Vanessa's law. So under the Vanessa's law provisions, there were some that came into effect already. So for example, the ability to compel a recall of a product. I think people were surprised to know that before June 2023, you could recall a head of lettuce, but we didn't have the authority to compel a recall of a natural health product. So that's in effect. The mandatory or the compulsory reporting of adverse or serious adverse events by healthcare institutions is a provision, but it needs regulations for those to come into effect. So those actually aren't in effect yet. We will be bringing forward regulations, and it will go through the full consultation process before we do that. So people haven't been complaining about that part of it. With respect to the adverse events, I think you did a really good job of going through some of the challenges. I think, what we've said is low risk is not no risk, and there are products either through the risk of the product itself. So Comfrey is an example. It was used as a tea, and it has very severe hepatotoxicity, liver toxicity associated with it, and there's been deaths associated with it. It still can be used as a topical on the skin, but even then it shouldn't be used on broken skin because it can be absorbed and have liver toxicity as well, so it can be quite dangerous. There are other products as well that can be quite dangerous, either if they're contaminated or if they're used in combination with other products as well. So again, it's rare to have very serious events, but in general, if a product has an effect on the body, then it can have a negative effect or an adverse effect as well. And the question is, what's the likelihood of that? What can you do to mitigate that? And so it's really about having information for consumers so that they can use those products safely, and that we can monitor those products so that if safety issues come up, that we can do that. And there have been products that, there's a product, Aristolochia, that's been used for over 2,000 years. And we, recently, started in the 90s, but really it was only in the 2000s that we found out that it can cause renal failure and cancers in the urinary system as well. So the products are not no risk.
No, one of the other parts of the law, in my understanding, is a requirement for honesty in advertising and not being able to make unsubstantiated claims. I talked to a colleague of mine who was practicing medicine and saying, well, really, how big of a problem is that? And I thought, because here I'm getting all these emails and postcards about this, is it really that big a problem that we're getting this political hit because of this? And he told me, he said he had a lot of patients who weren't taking they're statins, which have been proven by a whole bunch of studies and meta-analysis to reduce mortality, all-cause mortality, but I think particularly cardiovascular-related mortality. And I think his number was, the number needed to treat was 35. And he had a lot of his patients were not taking their statins because they were taking a natural health product that claimed to reduce cholesterol, but was totally unproven. So, and my assertion, well, how many people are being hurt? Well, if you have presumably 35 people who aren't taking statins because of that, one person is going to suffer an adverse effect. So how,
Dr. Pelosi, you're out of time.
oh,
I'm sorry
Okay.
about that. It was a long preamble. It was interesting. It was indeed. Mr. Thériault, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci. Bon, on va essayer de...
We will try to pinpoint the issues. My question goes to the three of you. The person who feel at ease with the question can answer right away. Let's say that your regulatory intention is commendable. Even the industry agrees with the intention. We are talking about natural health products. We are talking about natural health products, and it concerns the health of people. That there was an audit report submitted from the Auditor General's office. But currently, if there are not appropriate guidelines when it comes to the deployment of this and ensuring that we meet the set objectives through reform, we may find ourselves with contrary effects, results that are counter to what we're seeking to obtain. We are being told that there's going to be a financial burden that's very heavy. We'll discuss that. It's going to hamper research, hamper innovation, undermine competitiveness, and cause significant loss of jobs. Clearly, we do not want to destroy the industry. If we continue in this vein, we could find ourselves facing unprecedented competition because with the number of products that may end up in Canadian households that have not at all been approved nor scrutinized, we don't have the means to do that. So people will order online and bring in those products. So that's expected results that run counter to the objectives we're seeking to attain. What have you done to remedy these arguments? Have you carried out any impact studies, particularly when we are talking about recovering fees? What do you have to say faced with this problem? Thank you for the question.
Developing our cost recovery proposal, we have certainly given significant thought to the impact on small business. We understand that there's a large percentage of manufacturers in Canada who market natural products in Canada that are small businesses. We estimate it's at least 60% of them. So in our cost recovery proposal, we put forward mitigations in terms of the impact on those businesses. We included 25 to 50% reduction in the proposed fees, as well as a first submission from any small business would be of no cost.
Oui, vous l'avez dit tout à l'heure.
A while ago, well, I would like to take advantage of the fact that you are talking about cost. What evidence are you relying on to establish all those measures for the cuts? There's also the fact that pharmaceutical products are not subject to any tax, but for natural health products, there are taxes. Is there no way to implement your regulatory measures on what the government is doing? Thank you for the question.
It was developed based on strict Treasury Board guidelines for the development of costs, so using a similar process as is used for other types of health products in terms of how these costs are developed. And in terms of contributions of businesses to the economy in terms of whether they pay GST or contribute in other ways, that does not factor into the development of the model for the cost recovery proposal. But what we did take into account, and as I've already said, is we did very significantly look at the impact on small business and put in place mitigation measures to address small businesses.
Mais vous êtes consciente que
Are you aware that the big pharmaceutical companies have patents and they are able to recover their costs? It's peanuts for them. Have you carried out a study? What you established, is it based on an impact study and on evidence when it comes to the real effects? What did you rely on to come up with your criteria?
Our criteria, as I've mentioned, were developed based on very strict guidelines from the Treasury Board in terms of developing costs for services provided to industry. And in that process, we look at what the costs would be of providing those services, and based on that, then determine what the costs would be to industry across the different types of services provided. So other elements related to contributions to the economy or
il me reste une
differences
minute. Je
are
m'excuse.
not
Sorry, I have 1 minute left. Are you open to making some changes, taking into account criticisms from the industry? As you deploy guidelines, the regulations are there, so that has been done. As you implement these guidelines, are you open to looking into maybe changing the categories? Let's say for each category, it's going to cost a lot of money. I'm trying to give you an example. From this range of products to this product, this is the fixed cost. Are you willing to sit down with people to find a way of not hurting them to the extent that they would simply disappear, and so the supply also disappear along with them?
Yes, absolutely. We are taking into account all the comments, and we will be coming out with an updated proposal, and we'll sit down with stakeholders to address their concerns.
Mr. Terrio. Next, Mr. Davies, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. You know, I think there's some controversy, but I think there are some facts and points on which there's broad common agreement in Canada amongst everybody, and that is, I think, everybody wants natural health products to be safe, properly labeled, and the claims made to be backed up by evidence and science. I think we know that something like 3 out of 4 Canadians rely on natural health products in some way as an integral part of their daily or weekly health regimen. And I think the other thing that is often overlooked is that this is an industry that is well regulated now. I think some of the comments made seem to suggest sometimes that we don't have a lot of regulation. Now, industry and product users are asserting to me and other members of this committee, probably to you, that they believe that the current regulations are quite effective, perhaps they're not enforced enough, and that the proposed regulations are, if I may paraphrase, are perhaps a solution in search of a problem, or may even constitute a disease worse than the cure, or a cure worse than the disease, I should say. I want to test that thesis with you, if I might. So I've done some research. I went back, and 25 years ago, this committee studied natural health products and issued 53 recommendations to Health Canada. You're familiar with those, but what is more interesting is I found a document on Health Canada's website from 2003 that says Natural Health Products Directorate progress on the 53 recommendations of the Standing Committee on Health. So this is from 20 years ago. I just wanted to put a few things to you to test that thesis about where we're at. Health Canada said this about Recommendation 18. Inspection activities be performed consistently and on a regular basis by inspectors knowledgeable about the products. Status. The NHPD is developing an inspection strategy for natural health products. The goal of the strategy is to ensure an appropriate level of oversight for these products and consistency in its application. Are you telling me that that did not happen?
Thank you very much, Chair, for the question. Over the last, I'm going to say 15 years, what we've seen at Health Canada in terms of what we call post-market oversight, plain language inspection, is a gradual ramp up. So around the time that the report that's being cited would have come out, in and around that time, little activity, more reactive than proactive. What we've seen, though, over the last 8 or 9 years is a solid ramp up. And by that I mean starting with very time-specific, small inspection-like projects, I would say, up until, in response to the Auditor General's report, an inspection pilot a couple of years ago, and now an interim inspection approach where we're trying to keep momentum going until such time as we can fund a more permanent inspection program.
I've got a lot to get through, so I'll just catch it. I want to move to risk assessment, and Dr. Sharma spoke of this. Recommendation 20 of this committee 25 years ago, claims be assessed to ensure that there is reasonable evidence supporting the claim. Status. A guidance document on the standards of evidence will be published before January 1, 2004, when the regulations come into force. Prior to sale, all natural health products will be assessed to ensure there is reasonable evidence to support the claim and safety of the product. Is it your evidence before us that in 2004 that did not happen?
So at the time when, before 2004, it did not happen. We did not have, before we put the natural health product regulations in, we did not have a pre-market system. So before products were on the market, they weren't being reviewed. We do have that now. And actually that is one part of the system where, whether it's been the OAG office or others that have looked at it, have said that it's actually, that's running well. So the standards for approval, for authorization before the products go on the market is actually done, and it's working well.
If we talk about, now, more on risk, it says, the level of evidence required to support a claim for a natural health product is based on the level of claim and any safety concerns about one or more ingredients in HP. I think we would all agree that that's a wise move. I take it that that's been in place as well, that Health Canada has been ensuring that NHPs, the claims made, are based on the safety claim, the claim made about the safety impacts?
Yes, so that the idea is that for these products, the level of evidence that's required should match the type of product that it is and what it's being used for. I will say that through the self-care framework, and that was launched in 2018, we have also introduced classes of products based on the ingredients and whether or not there's something called a monograph there. So there's been, not only was a system put in place, but it's now being refined to more closely match the products.
I want to turn to adverse reaction. It says, the status, the NHPD is developing an adverse reaction reporting system for post-market monitoring. Product license holders are required to notify the NHPD within 15 days of any serious adverse reactions occurring in Canada and any serious unexpected adverse reaction occurring outside of Canada. So that's been in place, is it not, since about 2004? How many adverse reaction reports have you had since then?
So since 2000, so if we're saying from 2004 to 2021, we've had over 8,000 adverse reactions reported in which the natural health product use had a suspected role, and over 5,000 of those were labeled as serious, and a serious adverse reaction is either something that causes you to be admitted to hospital or prolongs a hospital stay.
Was there a causal relationship established?
That's your time, Mr. Davies. Can you answer that very briefly? Dr. Sharma?
So not for all of them, but we do causality assessments. The vast majority of those, there was a causal link to the natural health product. But
that data could be supplied to the committee? Could you supply that data to the committee, please?
I will check. The only thing is that there is personal identifiers and personal information in those reports. So I don't know if redactions or other reviews would be necessary before submitting
Perhaps
them.
the metadata, like just the numbers?
The summaries, we can see if we can provide that. We'll take that back and we'll see what we can provide.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Dr. Sharma. Dr. Kitchen, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank everyone for being here. It's greatly appreciated, and thank you for your presentation. Dr. Lorenko, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but your comments, and you talked about a number of irregularities being identified, and you gave certain numbers, and I think it was sort of, Dr. Sharma sort of touched on about the 8,000 at this point in time over the last, and that's since 2004, so that's basically 470 reactions in a year, in simple math. But my question to you is this: if you've identified that and there's a process in place, there's a regulatory process in place, what steps have you taken once you identified those to go to the regulatory process there and get answers for that?
Yes, and I'll just say that over the years, in terms of the adverse reaction reports, they have been increasing. So if we look at the last 2 years, we've had about 1,000 in those in a 2-year period, with again 700 or over 700 of them being serious. So it's increasing. We have more products, so it's understandable that we'll have more reports. Overall, though, that's likely a very serious underreporting, and that's the case for all health products. So I'll say that. But
Sorry, I appreciate that. So we're increasing over how many products?
So that's a good question. In terms of the products that have been authorized, there would be over 200,000 products. However, we believe that potentially only half of those are marketed. There's no requirement for companies to notify Health Canada if they're marketing the products, and so we don't really have that number. We've tried. In April, we tried to do a survey of companies to get an idea of the numbers of products that are marketed, and we only got about an 8.3% response rate on those.
Thank you.
Those
And in comparison to medicine, in particular pharmaceuticals, et cetera, when we look at, for example, grapefruit being a huge impact on ticagrelor or Lipitor, how many reactions do you get on that? How many responses to that? And comparing that numbers-wise, that would you just? I anticipate that you'd have a significantly higher number along those lines.
So for pharmaceutical drugs, prescription drugs, we do have higher levels, and it's in the tens of thousands. We also have a requirement for reporting, so increased reporting under Vanessa's law. We have the requirements for health institutions to be reporting those adverse events as well, and that's already shown an increase in reports. But yes, in general, there are more adverse events reported.
Thank you. So I'm just going to read here. This is a quote from what the ministers said in the House. It is very disturbing that there was more than 700 cases last year where there was a serious adverse health impact, including hospitalizations. Would you agree with that?
I would say that if there's, where these products or any products are taken to help people improve or maintain or prevent, or maintain their health or prevent disease. So if you have a serious adverse event that comes from that.
Okay,
then,
and I
yeah,
apologize for interrupting, but so what I'm hearing is you're not agreeing with that, or reality is we have the minister has reported on this number. You've indicated that you have records of it and the reference of it, and I'm just saying to you, can you give us an example of the 700 plus, by the sounds of it, and because I'd like to know how that research is collected and where it's stored and where it's provided to the public.
Doing surveillance of the products once they're on the market. One of the inputs into that is the adverse reactions that we get reported to Health Canada. We know those are vastly underreported for all products. We know that they're even more underreported for natural health products. We've done a pilot with poison control centers in the past, and for example, through poison control centers, in a 3-month period, they've got more reports related to natural health products than we did an entire year. So we know that's underreported. So that's not the only input in terms of looking at the safety of the products. We look at publications. We work with our international counterparts. So there's lots of information that we look at to make sure that we're assessing the safety of the products.
Now, I've just brought a simple sample, a very small sample of what I received from my constituents, and we all in here, and all 338 of us have received these significantly, and I have significantly more back in my writing. And they basically talk about the huge economic impact it's going to have. And these inflationary taxes that you're putting on these natural health products are going to even escalate this even more. And there's big concerns because the average Canadian, I would say to you, that utilizes or doesn't even know this is going on. And they're not going to know about it until all of a sudden, boom, it's going to be in their laps. So what economic impact have you done to show what the implications of this will have on Canadians?
Thank you for the question. We're hearing the feedback through our consultation. We're hearing the feedback from all of the affected stakeholders, and we've also received quite a large number of comments, up to about 5,000 comments through our consultation. We're taking that back. We're reflecting on the proposal we've put forward, and we'll make adjustments and do additional
So you haven't done
consultations.
an economic impact?
That's your time. Can you answer it briefly?
We did what we did was an assessment of what fees would need to be charged in order to support the program that we currently have and that we'd like to bolster in order to respond to the recommendations from the auditor general that identified a number of gaps.
Thank you, Dr. Lorenko. Next, Dr. Hanley, please, all the way from Whitehorse for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, I add my thanks to the witnesses for appearing today. And I want to maybe start a little bit big picture. Dr. Sharma, if you look at the effect of Vanessa's law as it applies to therapeutic health products and medical devices since 2014, what would you say? Could you sort of talk sort of big picture of how that has helped improve our information and consumer safety, basically, as regards therapeutic health products?
Certainly. So Vanessa's law really was it was quite a shift in terms of the authorities that we have to regulate products. One of the tools that comes with Vanessa's law is the ability to compel a recall. And again, it's not that we would get to the point where we would force a company to do a recall, but just by having that ability in place makes it easier when we have to do a recall for the companies to then comply. So it would take months to do a recall. Sometimes we wouldn't have companies providing information. It would take a long time for that to happen. And now when we have those provisions, that process or that time has really shortened. We have the ability to require tests and studies. So if a safety issue comes up, we have the ability to go to the company and again, make that request. And again, a lot of these things are regulatory backstops. So if they know that we have the authority to compel something to happen, then they're more likely to comply with those requests. So it really has made the regulation of the products more efficient. And when we're responding, again, these are responding for safety issues that are urgent, that we have those tools at our disposal. It also gives us, the ability, if we need to levy fines and penalties up to $5 million to do that. We have provisions in Vanessa's law about the sharing of confidential business information for public health benefits, and we've done that as well. So there's a whole series of tools.
So sorry to interrupt, but I think that gives us a picture. So I think what you're describing is already regulated products with additional measures that were brought in with Vanessa's law. And now what we're proposing is to bring similar, almost like there's a parallel between already regulated products, natural health products, now coming under this umbrella so that we have additional measures in place to provide that safety and assurance for Canadians consuming natural health products. Would that be more or less accurate?
I think before we had very blunt instruments, and if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And now we have more refined tools to be able to regulate the products appropriately.
Do you think that this would be a potential benefit for businesses, that additional, I guess, safety assurance, labeling, et cetera, that would reassure consumers and therefore should, in my mind, be an advantage for businesses selling these products?
Absolutely. And what it does is that it creates a level playing field. So if you're a compliant company, you won't feel the difference. you are already complying, you're already taking appropriate steps with respect to your products if a safety issue arises, so you won't feel the difference. But for other companies that are potentially not compliant, it will bring them into compliance and will give them the incentives to be in compliance. So again, it's a level playing field, and I think that's beneficial to all companies and of course to Canadians, because it improves the safety of the products that they're taking.
Okay, and then thresholds for businesses. Is there, I'm thinking of in my constituency some very small businesses that actually might make lotions or creams, or, what would be the implications for these sort of local, very small businesses with making natural health products?
Thank you for the question. So we certainly put in our proposal measures in order to reduce the impact on small businesses. But as we've already discussed, we've received a number of comments, and we know that we need to take a look at the proposal we've put forward, and we'll consider other potential measures to address businesses, but perhaps look at micro businesses even, and see if there are additional mitigation measures we can put in place to be able to support those businesses, because we understand that those are important for Canadians. They contribute to the economy, and we want to make sure that Canadians will continue to have access to a variety of products, and not just for current companies, but also companies in the future that may want to have access to the market, and be able to support those small companies in setting up shop in Canada and growing in Canada.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very
Hanley.
much.
Thank you, Dr. Hanley. Thank you, Dr. Lorenco. Ensuite, Monsieur Thériault pour 2 minutes et demie.
Ça fait mal.
2.5 minutes, that hurts. A while ago, you said that over 17 years, there were 5,000 serious cases. You provide us with more information. But since the model drew from the verification and inspection model for pharmaceutical products in 17 years, do you have any figures to provide us on the adverse effects on adverse reactions for pharmaceutical products?
Time out. Est-ce que vous pourriez les déposer, ces chiffres?
Could you provide us with those figures, submit them in the same way? And do you have the figures? Do you have an idea of the proportion of adverse reactions from pharmaceutical products that you collect over 17 years? Are you talking about pharmaceutical products, medications that are sold over the counter? Because there are various categories. There are natural health products. We also have pharmaceutical products obtained without prescription. I know, but do you have figures? Adverse reactions? Yes. Are you going to provide that? Thank you. Talking about labeling. In the impact study on the regulation, the preliminary study did not identify significant environmental effects, so no detailed analysis was necessary, and an additional environmental impact when it comes to the normal labeling process had to be minimal. But the industry carried out some labeling tests with new requirements. The labels had to be bigger. The boxes had to comply as well. You were told that there had to be some modifications. You indicated in an impact study that no evidence was provided to support the declarations made by the industry when it comes to additional cost and the impact on the environment. But you yourselves do not have any environmental study. So are you open to making sure that, first of all, you have a labeling model for 2023? Because the labels are outdated. You asked that we function with paper format labels and boxes. Why don't you use the QR code? Because we're looking towards the next 10 years. In 3 years, what we are proposing will be outdated, and you will be hurting the industry even more. So what do you think about that? Are you open to making changes to that?
With respect to using a QR code on the label, there was a number of things that we looked at. One was that with a QR code, it's not at the point of sale, you're not able to do a comparison between products that have a similar label. With respect to a QR code, also, the challenges are not everyone has a cell phone. They may not necessarily be able to use it. They may not want to use their data. If it goes to a website that has a lot of information, it might be long. They wouldn't be reading it. It's very difficult to enforce the information on a website because you can change it very quickly. And then the other thing is, if you take that key information off the label and just have the QR code, the only thing that's left on the label is the marketing. So it's a possibility, but there's a lot of reasons why at the point of care you don't have that information. And then, Chair, there was just a question on the environmental impact of the labeling, if
Quickly, please.
I may. In that, when we did the survey of companies, they told us that within a 6-year period, they normally change their labels anyway, regardless of if there's any other requirements or new regulations that are in place. So that's why there's a 6-year period to phase in, and there's no recall of product. So the enforcement is at the level of manufacturing, so we're not destroying any product, we're not recalling any product. So the impacts are, in terms of the environmental impacts, are minimal.
Mr. Davies, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Back to 2003. If I could take you back 20 years. I'm reading again from Health Canada's document. It says, the Natural Health Products Directorate recognizes that product labels should assist consumers in making informed choices. With respect to NHPs, labels should assist in selecting products that meet individual needs and expectations, as well as the merits and limitations of products. Labels should allow consumers and others to fully understand how products are to be used and stored to ensure their maximum benefit, and to be aware of any adverse reactions or other risks associated with the use of the product. Natural health product labeling provides consumers with all relevant information needed to make informed choices, and it for the recommendation that product labeling be standardized to provide clear and consistent product information. You reported the status as follows. NHP labeling requirements apply to all NHPs. Therefore, clear and consistent product information will be available to consumers. Now, there's a whole list of things that the NHP regulations in 2003 required: dosage form, net amount of weight, measure, number, list by proper name of each medicinal ingredient per dosage unit, authorized potency, qualitative list of all non-medicinal ingredients, recommended use or purpose, recommended route of administration, recommended dose, duration of use, risk information related, including any cautions, warnings, contraindications, or known adverse reactions associated, recommended storage, lot number, expiry date, and the description of the source material of each medicinal ingredient that the product contains when the ingredient is a plant-to-plant material. So my question is, if that's what you were telling Parliament in 2003, that that's what was going to be captured by labeling, what is the case to be made 20 years later to say that we need to change the labeling so that consumers are aware of things? Where was it? I know you weren't in the author at that time, but it was either not true then or it's not required now. Help me understand that.
So it was true then, and it is required now. And what we've done is that we've done considerable consumer consultations, health professional consultations, and what we found is that there are challenges with the labels. So the challenges in terms of lack of contrast, they're difficult to read, the font size may not be, in some cases it's 4-point font, which is microscopic, that there's no standardized way that the warnings were displayed. There wasn't modernized information on how you contact the companies. There wasn't allergen information on the labels, but overall it wasn't presented in a way that was standardized. It was different from product to product. It was very difficult to compare. And so there was information there. It's just how legible it was and how easy it was to access. We've got a lot of feedback on that. So the labeling is really putting it in a standardized way with all of that information.
I think I've said this to you before, Dr. But
That's your time. I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
Mr. Davies, you're over time. Mr. Doherty, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our guests for being here today. This is my first meeting with witnesses, being back onto this committee. And I apologize, I wasn't part of the study. I wasn't, our previous studies. But I want to go to Mr. Davies' comment regarding the Natural Health Products Directorate. Was it your testimony, and pardon me, I believe, Dr. Lourenco, you were part of Health Canada 22 years ago. You've been with Health Canada for 22 years. Dr. Hollett, probably about 10 years, 12 years? 20. Well, congratulations. And thank you. And Dr. Sharma, just probably 10 or 12 years, I think? Okay, 20 as well. Okay. So collectively, you've all been here for, around about the time that this is, the testimony that we just heard is it's just ramping up, or ramping up in the 9 years. So 53 directorates, or recommendations. And where are we at with the 53 recommendations? Again, just in the last 9 years, you've just been ramping up? Is that correct on the recommendations?
So those 53 recommendations go back to 1998.
Right.
When the Standing Committee
Right.
at that time
And then
recommended
2003, you started working on them?
and implemented new regulations in 2004.
Okay.
And then from there, made several improvements to the program.
Okay.
Both operational improvements and improvements in terms of making sure that we use a risk-based approach to the regulation of these products, and that we provide appropriate guidance and direction to industry wanting to market products in Canada. So we've made several changes over the years.
So, but of the 53 recommendations, where are we at with them?
So of the 53 recommendations, we've pretty much addressed the majority of them, with the exception of cost recovery. Cost recovery is one of them that's outstanding, that the committee at that time recommended the government look into and take an approach to make sure that we consult with industry to develop a cost recovery
Why
system.
only in the last 9 years have you started to ramp up on it? Is it capacity? Is it personnel? Is it cost? What is it?
With regards to what exactly?
Just, you said you've started to ramp up on the recommendations in the last 9 years. I believe it was Ms. Hollett's.
Or potentially just to say that, so the 53 recommendations were to create an entire framework for natural health products, a set of regulations. So that's been done.
Which is what we're also talking about as well, too,
So that's
right?
been done. I think the comment that Ms. Hollett was making was specifically on one part of the inspections.
Okay.
That was that part that so there was a promise to do, to increase inspections, and so that's started a little bit. What we're at right now is a phase where, when the regulations came in 2004, we had maybe 50,000 products max.
Now we have about 200,000.
Now we have about 200,000. We have over 800 facilities. So there's been a large increase in the industry. In order to fully to ramp up further on inspections, for example, we need additional resources to do that. And there's other places where we need additional resources. And part of that is what we're seeking is for some of those costs, not all of those costs, but some of those costs to be borne through cost recovery.
So how many businesses small businesses would you say are in the industry?
We have those numbers.
But it is your testimony that you've done about 5,000 consultations, correct?
Oh, so in terms of the percentage, it's a little bit difficult to know an exact number, but we estimate at least 60% of the businesses in the natural health product space would be small and medium enterprises. So approximately 6,000.
So 63% of 6,000.
So I have to
63%
say,
of 6,000.
okay, thank you. I have to say that this is I've been elected for about 8 years, and this is probably the topic that I've received the most mail and most feedback from my constituents about, and asking me to make sure that we're standing up for the consumers and standing up for the small businesses. And what the industry is telling us is that it wasn't so much as a consultation as it was, this is what we're going to do. And so they feel that their feedback from the ones that I've talked to, at least, that wasn't heard or wasn't taken into account. They also say that they have regulations that there isn't the capacity for Health Canada to really enforce it or to kind of follow suit with what they're promising it. So, what would your feedback be for that, or your answer to kind of what the industry is saying?
I mean, on the consultation space, if I look at all the products, the health products that Health Canada regulates, I think the natural health product sector is the one that has the most consultations. So through the associations, we've had technical briefings. We've had since 2016, had over 4,500 consumers, healthcare professional consultations. We've had, just in 2019 alone, we met with 70 different companies, one-on-one. There's been an incredible amount of consultation. So I understand that it's the cost recovery regime is challenging, and I think everyone can have their opinion on that. But I think the one thing that you cannot say is that we did not consult, and we are absolutely open to feedback and dialogue. And I mean, I just wanted to say that we're all in this for the same purpose. We want people to have access to these products, and they want them to be safe, effective, and high quality, right? That's exactly what we want. And we use these products every day. As people have said, 73% of Canadians use these products, and that 73% was back in 2010. We know that that's increased through COVID. We know that people have even more interest in terms of having access to products that they self-select to help maintain their health. So we're absolutely there. And again, we've done tons of consultations. We will continue to do those consultations to get feedback. And the labeling is an example of how we put something forward, we got feedback, we made modifications, and then we moved forward, and we took those into consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Next up, Mr. Johari, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to our witnesses. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I know you had an international commitment, and you changed that on a short notice. That shows the commitment to the topic at hand, respect for our committee, as well as the care you're showing for the Canadians, for their safety, and I thank you for that. A lot of conversation is being had around cost recovery and portrayal of the cost recovery as a tax, not only on the small businesses, but ultimately an increase in the price, therefore another level of tax during this inflationary time on the consumer. And I like to submit that I see the cost recovery as implementation of the regulation, empowering the Health Canada to ensure that the products that's being consumed more and more by all Canadians is a safe product. So I see the cost recovery as actually ensuring the safety of the product and the safety of Canadians, because regardless, when the cost recovery comes in effect in April of 2025, the burden of that cost is with the taxpayers regardless, because the Health Canada has to go through all of these to ensure all of these regulations to ensure people are kept safe, and that whether it comes out of taxpayers from another bucket or it comes through implementing these fees. And as you mentioned, not all the fees are being taken into account. I understand that there were 2 pilot inspection programs that the department did, and the results are very, very interesting. And I'd like you to, for the next probably 3.5 minutes, spend some time explaining those 2 pilot programs and how they support us ensuring the safety through what is called cost recovery, or ensuring that Health Canada is empowered to ensure the safety of the product and the safety of Canadians. Thank you.
The advertising, and then I'll turn over to Ms. Hollett on the GMP inspection. So the first pilot that we did, so it was in 2021, we conducted that pilot project to proactively monitor advertising. And so what the program did, the pilot did, was that it looked through an AI tool, it looked on the web for advertising of natural health products that involved cancer, the word cancer. And so there's a prohibition. So for certain diseases, serious diseases, you can't, as a natural health product, advertise or label a product to treat or cure that disease. Cancer is one of them. And so when we did that, we found 3,800 claims, cancer claims, and out of those, 63% of those claims were not appropriate claims. So they were either treating or curing or for whatever reason misrepresenting their product with respect to their claims for cancer. So that was one. And again, it's a snapshot. We've also just completed another one for some other diseases. However, we've just finished it. We're looking through the data as well, but it's on depression, obesity, and other issues as well. So there is an issue around companies representing their natural health products to do things that we know that they're not allowed to claim, and certainly that they can't do. And then
Specifically, which part of the cost recovery is addressing that?
So the cost recovery will have increased resources to do that type of surveillance. So to do that type of surveillance, to look for that, and then when those issues arise, to follow up on those advertising complaints. And then we do now have provisions if we need to levy fines or penalties if companies are not compliant, that we have the authority to do that as well.
Great. And on the second pilot, sorry.
Second pilot, and thank you very much for the question. So as I had mentioned earlier, inspections of NHP and NHP entities has been growing at Health Canada for some time now. But when the OAG report was released, we welcomed the opportunity to run an official GMP inspection pilot. And just for members who may not be aware, what that is inspectors, Health Canada inspectors, entering companies and assessing companies against good manufacturing practices or standards. We welcomed that opportunity because our program has been a very solid program in the reactive space for a very long time. So the ability to enter into the proactive space, that puts us in a better position to protect health and safety. But also we see benefits of inspection as being like across the board. Canadians, entities involved in the supply chain or involved in the industry, as well as Health Canada. So in 2021, we launched the GMP inspection pilot. It was 36 companies, manufacturers and importers. And we did inspections, as I say, based on those good manufacturing practice requirements. We had a chance to consult with and worked with industry and industry associations on the inspection pilot. And then we conducted those 36 inspections over the year. What we saw was what we would consider serious deficiencies in 42% of the inspections that we conducted. There was great collaboration between the entities we inspected when we've had those observations and taken timely action to address them. So I do want to make that point. However, what we came away from the pilot with was a confirmation of what we've seen over the last number of years of a non-compliance rate or serious deficiency rate of in and around 42%. What cost recovery would allow us to do when Dr. Sharma earlier in the meeting referred to there being gaps we needed to fill or improvements we needed to make, one of the initiatives that cost recovery would fund is a more robust permanent inspection program.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hollett. Thank you, Mr. Johari. Next, Mr. Majumdar, please, for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair, and good evening. Nice to see you all. Like Mr. Doherty, I'm new to this committee and new to this file, so I did not benefit from participating in decades of experience that you bring to this. But I was just doing some math on this, and I'll tell you, in my by-election campaign during this summer, this was a major issue, especially for the smaller side of the small, medium-sized businesses that you're describing. This would crush them, the anxiety they feel about these taxes that are coming their way, as well as the heavy-handedness generally of health policymakers over the last 4 to 5 years has created massive anxieties that I think would benefit from more empathy when considering how to engage them and to ensure the safety of Canadians in the products they consume. Health freedom is important, but so too is safety. But I was just looking at this, and maybe you can help explain this to me. 200,000 products at $542 tax for each product amounts to over $108 million of annual revenue, tax revenue, for the cost recovery piece of a 53-part program from 20 years ago. $108 million seems annualized seems like an excessive approach toward cost recovery, when I can think of the Asian Infrastructure Bank as one immediate means to accomplish cost recovery for these types of services, which I'm sure cost a lot less than $108 million a year. So could you explain to me the math around how this is the cost recovery that the Treasury Board's strict guidelines had produced, Dr. Lenko?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So you're referring to the right to sell fee, which is one of the fees that we are proposing in the cost recovery in the proposal, which is a fee that we would apply to companies to have right of access to the market. And it's a fee of just over $500 for a regular company, and there would be a 25% reduction if it's a small business. In our estimation of the revenues from that fee line, we made an assumption that there are likely to be about 50,000 products on the market, so not the 200,000. We have authorized 200,000 products, but in consultation with stakeholders in the past, our estimate is that there's probably around 50,000 products on the market.
$30 million annualized revenue for cost recovery for some 800 facilities that I think Dr. Sharma described. Again, this seems extremely excessive when you think about the 8,000 cases, 5,000 serious ones that were considered over the last number of years. It seems very ambitious revenue collection, tax collection through imposing fees on small companies who are already feeling extremely anxious about heavy-handed health policies that are designed to try and control the products that they wish to sell and to control the consumers who wish to pursue them, who wish to consume them. I'd just like to understand what logic is involved in $30 million annualized for cost recovery for any program of this scale.
With regards to the right to sell fee that we're talking about and the approximate 30 million, these would be the revenues that would be used to cover post-market activities, so to cover the surveillance of advertising, the assessment of adverse drug reactions.
You mentioned that. Forgive me. What's the cost of the program?
The overall cost of the program, based on the current proposal, is about $100 million. Is the estimated cost.
But before the proposal, how much was it?
Before the proposal, it's about 46 million. So we do need to ramp up.
Would love to see, if you don't mind. It'd be very helpful to have these figures tabled for the committee to study in more detail to understand what revenue you're looking to pay for the cost of the program as it stands. Thank you very much.
It's available online. The proposal is available online for anyone to download.
Could you table it to the committee, please? Mr. Chair, I should be directing my comments to you. My apologies. We would ask that the witness table it for the committee to consider.
Yeah. You're able to do that if it's publicly available? Yeah, thank you. Good. Okay. 17 seconds. I think we're good.
Thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Majumdar. Mr. Fergus, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to thank the officials who have come today. We appreciate the years of experience that you bring to this situation. I would like to set my time to see how much time I have left to ask the questions. I would like to come back to a series of questions that Mr. Thériault, my colleague from the Bloc Québécois, asked you concerning the number of adverse effects associated with the use of natural products. We talked about 700 over the past year. Is that the truth? More than 1,000 over the past 2 years, 700 serious adverse effects. Mr. Thériault also asked you a question. I think it's only logical to make a comparison. 700 cases of severe adverse reactions. What's the number linked to regulated products? either medical products that are sold over the counter or with prescription. You said that those figures are publicly available, but I would like to have a figure right here. Could you give us an estimate?
I have to come back to you with the specific number for the non-prescription drugs adverse events. Sorry, we
Would
don't
you
have that
know
number
for
right
prescription drugs?
now. It's usually, gosh,
You know, I'm not
it's
gonna
in the tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. Now, tens of thousands, but I'm assuming that prescription drug market is much larger, or the number of products available relative to the 50,000 natural health products that are available in Canada for sale right now. Can you give me an estimate of a comparison between the size of the NHPs as opposed to the size of prescription products?
I can give you for the non-prescription products, which are the comparable products to natural health products. So in terms of the size of the industry from a dollar basis for...
Well, I'm not certain if a dollar basis would be a good comparison, because I'm assuming that you're going to pay more for perhaps the non-prescription drugs, because they are considered a little bit more organized and they have more obligations to report in terms of their ingredients and the like, and being able to recall the stuff. So I'd like to compare roughly apples with apples.
Okay. So for numbers of products, for the over-the-counter products, that's non-prescription pharmaceuticals, since 1969 there have been over 5,200 products approved. And for the natural health products, there have been over 190,000. And again, it's a little bit difficult to compare, because for those sort of over 900,000 or 200,000, we don't know how many of those are marketed, because there's no requirement to let us know how many are marketed. But
so there's only been how many?
5,200.
5,200 over the last 54 years?
For over-the-counter products, yes.
For over-the-counter products. Seems low. But there you go. And you're saying that there and the contraindications that could happen with those products, serious ones?
We'd have to come back to you, but the ratio of kind of adverse events to the products are very similar between the over-the-counter non-prescription pharmaceutical products and natural health products. They're very similar.
All right. So there's nothing that's disproportionate. It's roughly about the same.
Right, and these products often are side by side on shelves. They're often treating the same things. They're often making the same claims. They're just under two different regulatory frames. We know from talking to consumers that they're not really aware that they're under two different frames. But again, overall level of risk is very comparable between those two categories.
I see. And is that, on an international comparison, is that about right as well? Or in your experience in terms of, this is not, Canada's not producing something that's an outlier in terms of this ratio?
It's not, but the challenge in terms of the international comparisons with respect to the natural health products is that there are very different regulatory schemes in different countries. So there isn't really a country that has the same system that Canada does. The United States is different. Europe treats them differently. Australia differently. The UK treats them differently. So it's a little bit apples and oranges making those comparisons.
I'm going to see if I could test the patience of the chair and slip in one.
Thank you, Mr.
There you
Fergus. You're past time. You used his 17 seconds. Monsieur Thériault, 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
J'ai essayé de faire un petit résumé.
I'll try to summarize, a small summary. When I asked whether there was any impact studies, you told me that there were guidelines by the Treasury Board. When I asked you, do you have any evidence, scientific evidence, on the preparation of the mitigating effects, mitigating measures? You said Treasury Board once again. When I asked you, do you have any studies, impact studies, environmental impact studies on labeling? You said you don't have any. You do not believe that they exist. You say, for example, that the industry has not demonstrated that what they are alleging is going to happen, but no one seems inclined to look into that situation. So you want to do your labeling to cover a 6-year period, and you claim that in 6 years, you are saying that your labeling will not be outdated. There are ways of using the QR code for the things we want to see and make sure that on a box there are important indications when it comes to the health of citizens. We could distinguish interesting information that we could see when we look at the product, and there are code readers. You could even have QR code readers. I find that your reforms are already outdated. I also asked you if you are open to changes. The environmental impact study is important. It's impossible for us not to imagine that if we are to come out with all sorts of information and put them on a bottle, on a box, this is not going to increase waste. It appears to me that that's simple common sense. Are you open to proposals that people on the ground could make to you to change that, because the environmental impact is important? Something else, and I'll conclude there. You've talked about inspections. You have started inspections, you want to do inspections, you've identified some problems with inspection, but have you produced any guidance? Have you provided industry with any guidance so that they can comply and properly react towards the inspections? Because people who've never been inspected for years will want to know what your criteria are to be able to comply and to make sure that we are proactive. Mr. Theriault. Your questions took 3 minutes, and you had 2.5 minutes, so you don't have enough time for answers, unless it's possible to provide very brief answers.
I will try. Thank you very much for the question. 2 very quick things. We could not agree more. When a sector is inspected for the first time, the actual inspection not only provides an opportunity to assess, but also educate and compliance promotion. And 2, to help in that cause, we have and we continue to work with industry to produce guidance such that industry has clarity and consistency on what Health Canada expects to meet regulatory requirements.
Thank you, Ms. Hullett. Over to Mr. Davies for 2.5 minutes for the questions and the answers.
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Sharma,
just
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the first part, very, very quickly on the labeling. As part of the labeling proposal, there was a regulatory impact assessment that's done. There's a cost-benefit assessment that's done. And then there's also provisions for small packaging and so all of that is part of the proposal. It's now completed and it's going to be implemented. But if there are changes that need to be made, we're open to those. But we believe that it's taken all of that into consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Davies, please.
Thank you. Some short snappers. How much money, I think you talked about the money you'll need to support the program. How much money do you estimate you'll need to support the program?
Our current estimated cost for the program with the improvements is about $100 million.
$100 million?
Yes.
And you've made a cost-benefit analysis report with respect to new labeling products. Would you provide the committee with Health Canada's full cost-benefit analysis report?
So that's also, it's available publicly, but we can table it.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. Canadians are currently permitted to bring personal use quantity of a natural health product into the country without requiring specific licenses for the import. Do you expect that consumers will be more likely to import products from foreign jurisdictions if these regulatory changes by Health Canada lead to higher prices and perhaps reduced availability of products in Canada?
So we do, thank you for the question. We do know that that is a possibility. What we prefer, and what is clear in our messaging, is our preference is always for Canadians to use NHPs that have been vetted by the department, that are safe and that are efficacious. While we realize that what you're saying may be a possibility, we already have quite a robust presence at the border. We do, as you say, allow for personal importation, but we are aware of the fact that that may occur.
A lot of Canadian businesses are telling me that that's what they think is going to happen. They think prices are going to go up, but products are going to be restricted. A lot of foreign companies are not going to bother with the Canadian market because they don't want to retool again. That will just result in Canadian consumers ordering things on the internet. Are you proposing any new restrictions on personal use importation of natural health products? And if not, why not?
So we are not at this time. One of the reasons is, as you say, we have heard, like you, I believe, a lot on this topic. On one side, including us as a regulator, as I say, our preference is for Canadians to use products and buy products that have been approved by Health Canada. However, we have another very vocal group within the country that is saying, maintain personal importation allowances. We want choice. If I choose to buy something from the United States or anywhere online, I want that choice. So there are two very vocal groups. So it is a very active discussion around finding a balance between those two positions.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you.
Next, Dr. Ellis, please, for 5 minutes.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. There's so many questions to ask and so little time. Through you, Chair, you know what? I find it interesting. These products are taxed. The tax revenue from this sector is about $2.3 billion, and you're telling me that you need $100 million more? That's insanity. How can you justify that?
The cost recovery proposal was developed based on the current costs of the program and the estimated costs with the improvements that we would like to put in place, improvements to inspection and to online monitoring of online advertising, and just increasing resources in those areas to make sure products on the market are safe for Canadians.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I guess I don't understand. That means $2.4 billion to run a program. Wow, that's a lot of money. It's an exorbitant amount of money. The question, I guess the other questions that I have are really related to looking at the scale of these issues. These issues are really, I hate to say this, I was a family doctor for a long time. We talked about this nebulous number of 700 people who may have been harmed. Some of them, in the words of the minister, might have been admitted to hospital. And I'll follow on with what Mr. Fergus was trying to get to. Prescription drugs, admittedly, help tons and tons of people, reduce mortality rates, make people live longer. In this country, and I'll have the reference for you if you'd like, unlike what you have not been able to provide me, is that 50,000 seniors alone were admitted to hospital last year because of prescription drugs, which you already regulate. 700 might have had an adverse event in the natural health product sector, and some might have been admitted to hospital. I would suggest to you that we're talking about unnatural regulation, that you're trying to regulate a sector which harms almost no people. It makes no sense. This is nonsensical for perhaps $2.4 billion of a budget. I can't even understand it. And also, not only are we going to regulate the natural health products sector in Canada to death, into extinction, we're going to tax it to death, but we're going to allow Canadians to continue to get medications, natural health products, online from unregulated facilities elsewhere. I can't even, there's no words for this. And I can understand why my colleague brings a small smattering of concerned citizens. You know what? This is a part of the job where people come up to each of us in public and say, how can you fight this so that I can continue to get the vitamins or the probiotics or the prebiotics that I want to have? And the scale of the issue is minuscule. And I can't even understand this. And the money that you want to recover, and we've already heard from my colleague that from the right to sell fee, which is one of the fees amongst an innumerable number of others, is up to $30 million and perhaps $100 million because it's not simply what is sold. It's actually the licensed product, as I understand. So, the amount of money that you're asking for consumers is exorbitant, and I guess I can only attempt to understand that by, that this government has driven Canada into the proverbial poorhouse, and that we need to recover out of the pockets of Canadians another multi-billion dollars to fund the foolish spending of this government. I guess that's the only thing. And to understand that very clearly is simply to follow the money, and to ask very clearly as well that you table the number of people who are potentially having serious adverse events, and some of whom have been admitted to hospital based on some nebulous concept and some nebulous numbers that no one has been able to find. And trust me, we have searched very hard. The final thing I would say, through you, Chair, is, and there's not going to be a question here, but thank you very much. I realize I have a timer on. The issue here is really related to the fact that we're regulating something, once again, to try and tax consumers further into the poorhouse when they can't afford to feed their families, put a roof over their heads, or heat their homes in the coming winter. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Pawlowski for 5 minutes, please.
Well, I'm not going to make a political statement. I'm actually going to ask a question. Now, Dr. Ellis has claimed that the cost of this program for regulation of natural health products is $2.4 billion per year. So I'm going to actually give them the opportunity to respond to your allegations and tell me, how much is this going to cost per year?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to respond to the non-question and the question. So right now it's a $44 million program. With the changes in the improvements, that will increase to a $100 million program. And we can go through all of those improvements. There's no billions. It's millions. Even that is, we're not saying that that's an insignificant amount of money. It's a considerable amount of money, but it's the amount of money that we need to make the improvements for Canadians to go into a safe marketplace. And it's a little bit apples and oranges if you're comparing natural health products to pharmaceutical products, because it's all about risks and benefits. What are you treating? You will accept a risk associated with the chemotherapy, for example, that you wouldn't necessarily with something that's to treat a headache, for example. So it's all about risks and benefits, and what we really are striving for is having a regulatory system that has the appropriate level of touch based on the risk of these products. And what we found is that there are some parts of the program that exist that are functioning quite well. The pre-market review, the standards that have been set, and again, I just want to clarify, because there's been some rhetoric around us all of a sudden changing the levels of evidence that we're looking for. We're not saying that. We're saying that there's some gaps. There's some gaps with respect to how these products are represented to Canadians. There's gaps and there's issues around the quality of these products. We've had 100 recalls over the last year and a half for fiberglass and bacterial contamination in these products. We have a concern around the advertising and the way that these products are represented and what they're claiming to do for people. We have concerns about the facilities. So there are gaps that we need to fill, and there's resources that we need for that. And it is a $5 billion a year industry that doesn't pay any fees. These are not taxes, these are service fees, and for those service fees, they also get accountability, and they would get timelines and deadlines for the services that are provided to them, and it's not all of the costs. Australia cost recovers 100% of their costs for this product line. We're not, it's a portion of those costs.
Okay, so the allegation's been made here. This doesn't make sense. The quotation was that the number of people harmed is minuscule, which is 700 over 2 years. But don't you also have to factor in the number of people who are harmed by a claim which is untrue? So, for example, cancer patients that aren't getting their medications because they believe a product advertising about a natural product being helpful. does that not also have to go into the cost-benefit analysis when you look at people who are adversely affected by relying on a natural product which isn't proven? Is that not part of the equation in terms of the $100 million a year that's going to address
It is
this
part of
problem?
it. And again, I don't want to misrepresent these products. They are generally low risk, but we had a tragic 19-month-old in Alberta that died because of using natural health products instead of treatment for meningitis. Dr. Steve Vindel, his emergency physician, in Toronto, had a patient that was stable on medications for seizures, was taken off those medications, was put on zinc, went into status epilepticus, which is constant seizures, and died. So it does happen. And so it's really the principle is Canadians should be able to, they're self-selecting. So they're self-selecting these products. They should have the assurance that they're going into a safe marketplace when they're picking up a product. What's on the label is what's in the bottle. What the advertising claims that are being made are accurate, and that the quality of that product that's in that bottle is high quality, and it's not going to be contaminated with bacteria or other things as well. That's the principle.
Oh, I have 1 minute. So do you know what is going to be the increase in price for your average natural health product as a result of the new cost recovery program? So if I'm buying my vitamin C or whatever I'm buying, what percentage increase of price will result from implementing these measures?
If we look at all the increased costs, it works out to $1.60 per Canadian total for all the costs. Now, and that's if every cent of those costs are passed along to the consumer. Again, we have over 60% of these companies that are small and medium, but we have some very large companies as well. And again, we've got fee mitigation for it. So
it'll cost your average Canadian $1.69 more because of these regulations.
If we take all of the increased fees and we actually pass those directly on to Canadians.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. Next, Dr. Kitchen, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And I think when you say $1.60 per Canadian, you're making it out for every Canadian when every Canadian doesn't use the product. Number two, the reality is that $1.60 doesn't include the tax that will be put on it by the inflationary costs that are being created by what you're putting onto the product, the $542 per product. On top of that, the costs that will be factored in when you start looking at the huge costs that you have on fee line, basically the pre-market evaluation, which can range up to plus $50,000. So those costs, so when you say $1, you're basing it on a very small factor of the taxes that are being put on there. Because the cost that the producer is going to have to do, is going to, as my colleague indicated, when you grow the food and you tax the farmer and then you transport that, you tax the transporter, those costs come down on the consumer and the individual. So those costs are high. But what I'd like to get at is, you talked about inspecting facilities, and you talked about doing that, and you sort of indicated inspection-like. Now, the question I have to you is, how many have you done?
Under the pilot program that I mentioned, we did 36.
36 since 2004.
That was 36 in 1 year of the pilot in the 21-22. But since that time, we've done another 39, and we have 37 more planned between now and March 31st.
So you do 37 a year is what you're saying at this point in time. That's it?
No, sorry. We did 36 during the pilot. This year, we're hoping to do in and around 57. And in the current structure we're in now with no cost recovery, we would even like to do more.
How many people do you have doing this?
In our program right now, in different functions, not just inspections, approximately 22.
22. How often do you do them?
How often do we do inspections?
Yes.
So right now, companies are not on a cycle. They don't get inspected every 2 years or 3 years. We are constantly doing inspections.
So, but what I'm hearing is you're basically doing 100 a year out of how many businesses that are in Canada. And ultimately, I was a regulator in my previous life. as the regulator for a profession, and I understand regulation very well. Ultimately, you talk about regulating, but it appears to me that you're not following the processes of how the regulation should be done. But what I'd like to get to is you also talked about being open to feedback. Now, that's fine to say you're open to feedback, but what are you going to do with that feedback? You can say I'm open to that feedback, but if you don't act on that feedback, what assurances do these businesses have that you actually will act on the feedback that they give you?
I mean, you don't have to believe us when we say that. We've actually demonstrated it. So when we look at the labeling initiative, consultations before the initiative went forward, put a proposal out, got comments, changed the proposal. We put a 6-year phase-in period in to account for that feedback that we got from industry. We've got comments from consumers. It was all incorporated. So that's basically, for that initiative, we did a full regulatory program, and we took all that feedback and we put it into place, and then we finalized it. And we intend to do that for any regulation.
So you have basically got the feedback and you've tabulated that feedback so people can see that this is what was sent to you, and therefore they can see that that is available.
Yes.
Can you provide that for the committee?
Yeah, and it's available online, but yes, we can do that.
Can you provide that for the committee?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So when you do that feedback and they suggest to you that the fees are too high, what actions will you take?
So that's what we're in the process of doing now. The fee proposal is just that. It's a proposal. It went out for consultations, for a 90-day consultation. We put that out. We got 4,700 comments. We are in the process of looking through those comments, and then we'll come back with any changes based on those comments.
One minute. One question. Thank you. I guess I look at this and when I see what you're talking about, I still haven't heard from you what would say to me that I could walk out of this office and say to these constituents of mine that they're guaranteed that when you provide that, basically that feedback to you, that they're going to be listened to. That's the assurance that we need. That's what the Canadians need, because you're going to tax them and they need that assurance. How are you going to give that to them?
So again, this is a cost recovery proposal, right? So it is activities that are done by the regulator to regulate these products. Right now, Canadians are paying 100% of those costs, and there are gaps that we need to fill. We need additional resources to do that. There are only 2 ways of getting those resources. Either Canadian taxpayers pay for it, or the industry pays for some of it. Natural health products are the only product line that are health products where Canadian taxpayers pay all of those fees. It is a $5 billion industry per year in Canada. The cost recovery proposals are there based on a very standardized way that we calculate the fees. All of that's there in the proposals. We've got comments. A lot of the comments are we never, ever want to pay fees. It's a little difficult to do something with that. If there's constructive feedback or suggestions on how to modify things, we're absolutely open to looking through that.
But if the business has an increased cost, that cost will be related to the people.
Time, Dr. Kitchen. Okay, thank you. Dr. Hanley, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and pleased to have another chance to ask a few questions. I'm just reflecting on the influence. Speaking of feedback, I understand that Public Accounts Committee deliberated on these topics last year. I'm quoting some colleagues of my conservative friends across, one of whom said, what is the level of the sense of urgency to get some real strong deterrence and actual teeth in reference to the Attorney General report showing NHPs being contaminated? And another one who said, do you not find this disturbing that there are products out there right now that are supposed to be recalled and are not being recalled? So I sense some uh, some perhaps mixed messaging from my conservative colleagues about the need to address the safety of Canadians with measures like this. And I'm for one, happy to see that Health Canada and the Minister of Health is stepping up to include natural health products where they pose risks, that we make sure those gaps are closed. And Dr. Sharma, you've spoken a lot about costs. I think you've clarified a lot of our questions about costs and what that actually means to consumers. But can I just come back to the 160 per Canadian again, and how can you just elaborate on that, just so we understand what that means for Canadian consumers?
So currently what's happening is that all of the costs are borne by taxpayer dollars, so for the entire framework. If we're looking at the increases from the cost recovery revenues, if we spread that, again, those costs across all Canadians, and this is not just Canadians that are using products or not using products, but across all Canadians, if 100% of those costs were passed along by the industry to Canadians, that would be the equivalent of $1.60 per Canadian, regardless of if they use the product or not. And again, it's really up to the companies what they do with those increased costs. And again, the number, the 58,000 is used in terms of the fees. That's a class 3 highest complexity product where it's very novel and it would take additional time. That's the minority. The majority of products are class 1s. And the fee for a new product seeking to market it in Canada would be just over $1,000. With the fee remissions for a small company, that would be $562. The equivalent of that for a pharmaceutical prescription medication would be over $500,000 as a fee to Health Canada.
Thank you very much. Is it possible that presently we are underestimating some of the risks that because of this, closing the need to close these gaps in information? Is it possible that we are actually underestimating some of the safety risks of natural health products?
I mean, I think we don't know what we don't know with respect to the products because we have a reactive system. So both in the post-market space, in the inspection space, in the advertising complaint space, it's reactive, so it's based on either we're doing pilots or if something comes to our attention, then we can investigate. We really don't have a system that's proactive, so definitely we're missing things. Again, I don't want to misrepresent these products as being riskier than prescription products, for example. That's not the case. They are low risk. They're just not no risk, and we know that in certain circumstances, they can cause considerable harm, and either cause considerable harm because of the products and how they're used, if they're overused, if they're contaminated, if they're used inappropriately. So there definitely is an underestimation of the risks.
Yeah, and certainly sometimes we tend to, given that many Canadians, there's a large percentage of our population that use natural health products. We want to make sure that we address potential gaps in safety so that, again, we can provide that assurance to Canadians. They know that they can be reassured, and also it helps to support the many businesses that are appropriately profiting from the sale and production of these products. So thank you very much. I'm probably out of time right about now.
You are indeed. Thank you, Dr. Hanley. Monsieur Thériault, 2 minutes et demi.
Merci.
Thank you very much. You talked about $5 billion, a $5 billion industry. That includes $2.8 billion of taxable income revenue. We're talking about a $100 million program. You have no indication from the Treasury Board as to the amount that is generated in taxes by that industry. You also have no indication whatsoever about the impact of the recovery cost, the impact of the mitigating measures, what consequences it would have on that amount because maybe the businesses will disappear. We still do not have any such information. Do you agree with me that if we were to look at the sales tax, the taxable revenue for a $100 million program, well, you consider that it's the taxpayer who pays? Yes, but somehow, is there no negotiable margin to make sure that, first of all, we are able to measure the real impact on businesses, the small businesses, and ensure that we are able to consider, take into account what is considered. I see 58, 23,000, and so on. And there's still room to consider others because you are not relying on any scientific evidence.
Merci pour.
Thank you for the question.
We are currently looking at the comments that we have received from through our consultation, and we'll adjust our proposal. But based on the proposal that we have consulted on, if we look at the majority of companies on the market, over 60% of the companies are small business, and a large majority of them market only a small number of products, 1 to 5 products. And most of them maintain those products on the market, so they're not bringing in new products, for example. And if we're looking at the current fees being imposed on the majority of those companies, we would look at about up to about $2,000 a year is what a company, a small business, would pay in order to be able to market their 5 products on the market. But that being said, we understand that that could still be difficult for some businesses, so we are looking at all the comments that we have received, and we'll take additional measures to mitigate impacts.
Thank you, Dr. Lourenco. That's your time. Where are we? Mr. Davies, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to explore a little bit of the policy around this cost recovery. And I'll tell you what my brain is saying. First of all, this idea that we're not getting money from this industry is wrong. NHPs pay sales tax. Pharmaceuticals do not. That's a policy choice. So every time a consumer goes to a store and buys a natural health product, they're sending money to the federal government and probably the provincial government as well. They are being taxed. Number two, it's been said repeatedly that this natural products are the only line of health products for which Health Canada does not currently charge fees. But aren't we comparing apples to oranges? Pharmaceuticals, particularly brand name, they get 20 years patent protection of monopolistic pricing power. Natural health products do not. Also, pharmaceutical products for 80% of Canadians are reimbursed through insurance plans. Natural health products are not. So taking one thing and saying, well, we're going to have cost recovery for NHPs the same because the other ones do, without taking into account the entire fiscal structure, strikes me as being not only unfair, but financially wrong. I just want to state that. I just want to turn to this. I find myself unclear about the data. We say that the products are low risk, but there's no risk. Well, all products have no risk. I mean, I could buy a basketball or a Kleenex, or my coffee in front of me has risk. I'm trying to find out what the actual data is that you have that suggests that there is required to be a change. You said 80% of the products in the sample were advertised with misleading product information, and 56% were marketed with misleading label information. But Health Canada's own compliance monitoring project from 2015 found the opposite. You found that a label review found 92% to be compliant. How do you explain that discrepancy between those two reports?
So the two reports were, so one was the CSED, this is the OAG audit, and what they did is that there was a consumer protection organization that raised the issue around cancer claims. And then when they looked at those ones that the Consumer Protection Organization had raised, 88% of those made claims, advertising claims that were false or misleading, and then 56% of the labels had false or misleading information. Again, small sample, That's the one we did. When we did it at Health Canada, it was something similar. We did the look online on the web, used AI to look at that. We had 3,800. In that one, we found 63% of them were making false or misleading or treatment claims or false or misleading claims for cancer. So it's the 88 and 63, but again, you have to look at how those samples were taken. That's the apples and oranges.
Compliance rate is wrong?
So that was on the label. So that's not advertising claims, but that's on labeling,
On the labeling.
overall, having the ingredients and et cetera on
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Mr. Doherty, please, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair. Dr. Sharma, I want to go back to one of your comments that you made earlier on, and you referenced some deaths from attributed to natural health products. One was the 18-month-old toddler in Alberta. I believe it's Ezekiel Stefan that you're referring to. Isn't it true that the situation is different than what you're stating? That the baby didn't pass away from using or taking natural health products. The baby ultimately passed away because the parents didn't believe in going to the hospital, and they took the baby. The baby was very sick, and they tried home remedies to try and get the baby better first. And it wasn't necessarily, the death wasn't necessarily attributed to a specific natural health product. Isn't that correct?
So again, the information that we have is the same as people have in terms of the of what was in the news. So my understanding was that they were using natural health products and natural treatments instead of
like garlic tonics,
instead of antibiotics, because the child ended up having bacterial meningitis. That's
right.
what.
Correct, but you can't specifically tie that to one specific natural health product that was mislabeled or dangerous. Is that correct?
So the point I think there was just, and this was it was in relationship to another comment of people thinking that a natural health product might be used for something.
So what you're saying,
not.
your comments were being misrepresented.
No, I was just giving context, and so
but
the other
context.
context.
The context, if with all due respect, I believe you to be a good person. But the context that you used in your testimony today was to say that, well, a vast majority of these health products are safe. There was a tragic loss of a toddler from one. You used that as your testimony, and the reality of your testimony is you misrepresented that situation. Is that correct?
Respectfully, Chair, the idea is that we did a survey. Products are making claims against cancer. They're not allowed to make treatment claims against cancer.
But I'm not talking about cancer.
And if somebody believes that claim and takes that medication for cancer instead of treatment, then that could have serious consequences.
Yes,
for a child
specifically
who has
for
meningitis,
Ms. Sharma, specifically for this,
just trying to finish my
for this
sentence,
testimony. I have a short period of time. Sorry, we're just. But your testimony was.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Just your time won't stop. Dr. Sharma, you are entitled to as much time to answer the question as it takes him to ask the question, and I will make sure that you get that, but you won't get any more. Go ahead.
So I just want to be clear and give you a chance to clarify or withdraw that statement, because, in fact, it is misrepresentation of this. And listen, I don't want anybody to pass away from taking natural health products. I had a natural health store back in the 90s as well, too. That dates me. And so, I, too, was on the end of saying, well, this is the next thing that's going to get you muscles and what have you. Did I know? No, I didn't. But I guess your point today was that because of unregulated, or a product being unregulated, we saw the death of an 18-month-old toddler. That was what your comments came across. And I'm just asking you to probably withdraw that, because in fact it was that the parents, their wishes were not, they didn't believe in hospitals at the time. They thought they could deal with the sickness. They didn't understand the depth and the seriousness of the illness, and they tried with home remedies to make their child. They loved their child by all accounts. I believe that they were charged with undue care, but ultimately, I think your comments were misleading. You may not intended it. that child didn't die because they used a natural health product. They died because they didn't get the appropriate treatment at the time in a timely fashion. Is that correct?
Okay, now, Dr. Sharma, you won't be interrupted. You've got 2.5 minutes to answer the question.
you.
And that is the last question.
Thank you. So
from Mr.
respectfully,
Doherty.
Chair, I'm a pediatrician. That's how I was trained. I was trained to look after children. I don't think there's anything more tragic than the loss of a child, and I don't think any parents should have to live through that. And I'm sure that these parents very much love their child. That was not the intent. The intent in the discussion that we're having is that if you have natural health products that are making claims against serious diseases, and people believe that they may be using those treatments instead of using treatments that could potentially help their own condition or that of their loved ones. That was really the context. And the context is that, for example, the other example was a physician that said that one of their patients was taken off their medications and put on a natural health product for seizures and had tragic consequences. So it was just in the context of that. I don't want to cast any aspersions on any parents. It's just that when products are being misrepresented, then there can be consequences, and it's
Point of
not
order,
just
Chair.
the
Point of order.
toxicity of
Yes,
the
Dr.
product
Ellis.
itself.
I think that what we asked was that there would be an answer to the question, not an expansion of it or direction around other things. What the question was very clear was related to the fact that you cannot regulate what parents do to their children. And regulating natural health products would not have made this child live longer if their parents chose to do something different. That answer does not answer that question at all.
I'm sorry, Dr. Ellis, that isn't a point of order. And if you could finish your answer, Dr. Sharma, and then we'll get on with the last round. Go ahead and finish.
Thank you, Chair. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
A question that just might clarify for everybody.
Well, the last question is going to go over here.
Okay. Well, just on this, I think would help all of us and Dr. Sharma. In that case, was the product that was given, did it make a claim that it would treat the particular ailment that the child had?
So we don't have the details, but the understanding was that the parents believed that it could treat the condition that the child had.
Okay. The last round of questions goes to Mr. Fergus for 5 minutes or less.
With great trepidation, I'm going to continue that vein of conversation. I think Mr. Davies asked a very good question, and your answer was I think, very illuminating. The reason why I say great trepidation because the proviso is, and I know Mr. Doherty would agree with this as well, no one wants to impute or cast aspersions upon any parent. And as you'd mentioned, a death of a child is a tragedy beyond measure. But I think the point that you made in your final answer in responding to Dr. Davies is that, sorry, Mr. Davies, forgive me.
It's got a nice ring to it.
It does have a nice ring to it, is that what often happens is that if you, as you'd said, and I think it's well worth noting, if you believe that a product that is, if you believe a claim of a product, but that claim is unverified or unsubstantiated, it could have tragic consequences in that because it's not like it's a belts and suspenders that you take to natural health product and a product that has undergone scientific rigor and study to make a validated claim. Usually people pick one or the other. And I could see the attraction of why people would want to take natural health products. People are very concerned about what goes into their bodies and so on and so forth. That's a very current view in Canada, and it's existed for a very long period of time. And I'm not going to call into questions what people's intentions are. But it seems to me that the minimum that we would want to do to ensure that Canadians are safe, especially when it seems to have the same type of when you answered my last questions, has the same number of adverse people as prescription drug prescription drugs as natural health products, then you would want to make sure that the claims that are made by those natural health products or the ingredients of those natural health products are clearly defined so that people can understand what they're taking and to making sure that they know what's going into their body. Is that a fair comment to make?
Yes, absolutely. And it's that the claims that are being made, so what someone is saying that product is doing is accurate, it's truthful, and it's supported by evidence that's appropriate for that product. That when you look at that label, you can read it and understand it and know what's in the product and know what the adverse events are and what the allergens are and how to contact the company. And that you have assurances that what's in that bottle or that tube is of high quality, it's not contaminated, it's not adulterated in any way, shape, or form. So, and all of that then allows the consumer to have confidence in go into a safe marketplace, to know that they can have confidence in those products. And that's really the goal. And that's not just our goal at Health Canada, that's every company's goal as well. And that's we're all working towards the same thing, is to make sure that information is accurate and that people can make informed decisions about their own health.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Colleagues, I'm going to pose a question for you, then I'm going to dismiss the witnesses to give you a minute to think about the question, and then I'm going to ask you to answer the question, and then we're going to call for adjournment. Here's the question. Our calendar calls for us to commence a review of the draft report on medical devices at our next meeting. But we have not yet finished the draft report on children's health. So my question for you is, do you want to do medical devices or children's health at our next meeting? Park that for now, and I'll come back to you to see if you have an answer for me right away. To our witnesses, thank you so much for the patient and professional manner in which you handled all of the questions, as usual. And thanks for the work that you do on behalf of Canadians, and for being here at this late hour in this climate. Thanks to all of you. What's your wish for the next meeting, Dr. Ellis?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a motion, actually, since you brought up some committee business, that the committee conduct its upcoming studies on women's health concurrently with its study on the opioid crisis, owing to the escalating opioid epidemic that is having a devastating impact on the health of Canadians.
Given the hour, can we consider that to be a notice of motion to be dealt with after the appropriate 48 hours notice?
Well, I think, Chair, actually, that it is in order. You yourself brought it up as brought committee business into this, and I think it germane that we bring this up now in a public meeting, that we highlight how important the opioid crisis is, that we should bring it up sooner than later, and actually have this particular study run concurrently with the women's health study.
I have a point of order.
Mr. Davies with a point of order.
Dr. Ellis moved his motion and he finished speaking, and then you took the floor, and I had my hand up to take the floor next, and then Dr. Ellis just jumped in. I don't think he was recognized after that.
Sorry, I don't know that I saw your hand, Mr. Davies. So did you have an intervention now? Yes. Go ahead.
I move to adjourn.
Okay. Just hang on one second here. So there was an attempt to put a motion on the floor. I ruled the motion out of order because we are not in committee business. You're free to challenge the chair if you wish on that. But I asked a simple question as to what do you want to do next week. The committee business wasn't on the agenda. We're not in committee business. You can answer or not answer the question if you like. That doesn't open the door. So the motion requires 48 hours notice because we're not in committee business. The motion is out of order, and I will now entertain a motion for adjournment. Okay, Mr. Davies.
I move to adjourn.
Is it the will of the
challenge? I want to challenge the chair, as you suggested I could, Chair, actually.
Well, the motion to adjourn is not debatable. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting?
Yes. Wow.
All those opposed to adjournment? Okay, the meeting's adjourned.